Hey, it's the new year, and you know what that means. Time to get your butt in gear. Okay, on the Speed Secrets podcast today, I'm talking with a driver fitness trainer, Trey Shannon, and he's got some very simple, actionable advice that will make you an even faster driver and have more fun. Hey, Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the show. And today I'm talking with Trey Shannon, fitness trainer for the stars, some big names in racing and some not so big names in racing, at his facility in Charlotte, Podium Performance Fitness. And welcome to the show, Trey. First of all, hope you had a great holidays, and I hope that you were able to stay fit and eat healthy a little bit over the holidays.
Yeah, thank you, Ross. I really appreciate you having me on, and thank you very much. My holiday was great. Did manage to get some training in myself. We had a nice little holiday up in the mountains in Maryland, so I got to do some good trail running and stuff like that. So improvised a little bit with what I had, but still had a good time, and managed not to get too sick to the stomach over the course of the few days I was up there.
Yeah, well, I think obviously with it being the new year, I think, a lot of people kind of go through the holidays and go, okay, this is the last big meal, or, this is the last day of laying around on the couch and whatever, new year, I'm going to get fit again. And, obviously that's kind of some of the stuff I'd like us to talk about. Not everybody listening to this show is a professional who can, spend 5 days a week at the gym working out specifically for driving. But I think everybody that's listening to the show, they know that, it takes some fitness, it takes some stamina, it takes eating well, it takes some training to drive and perform at your best. So that's kind of what I'd love us to talk about. And anything you can share with, some tips, some advice, some ideas, it's going to help drivers perform better in 2019 would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's funny that you mentioned the, training for racing. It's kind of been sort of a hot topic, I guess, the last several years.
Yeah.
With, a lot of other athletes who aren't drivers, football players and things like that, actually making comments about how drivers aren't athletes. And I think everybody who's in racing has either just brushed it off or tried to fight it, but nobody really actually believed that drivers weren't athletes. At least nobody in racing really ever believed that drivers weren't athletes. And I really believe that extends all the way down to every single level of racing. It's not just, guys in prototypes and IndyCar and NASCAR Cup cars. Everybody who does any kind of racing needs to have some sort of preparation, I feel. And, some people do, some people don't. And I honestly believe that if given the exact same level of talent, say you have two different people who have the exact same level of talent, the one who's training for racing is going to beat the one who isn't training for racing, all other things being equal. So yeah, I think, the new year also brings a new racing season that we all get so excited for. For some people, it starts a little sooner than others. I know I've got some guys that are currently getting ready for the Daytona 24, about to go off to the Roar this week. So, their training is at a different phase, what we would call a different training phase than maybe some of the guys that start their season a little bit later. And, but everybody I'm working with is already, eyes totally focused on 2019 and gearing up for that. And, I think a lot of the amateur racers and even weekend racers and that sort of thing, there's no reason they can't be doing a little training for 2019 also.
Yeah. And, I know from talking to, not just racers, but, and I don't want to make that sound like just, in any way, but, track day drivers who go to the track and they're not going to race wheel to wheel, but they're going to the track and they want to perform at their best. And, there's not a driver listening to this podcast who hasn't gotten to the end of a day, whether they've been on the track 4 times or 2 times or whatever. But at the end of the day, they go, wow, I'm exhausted. And, some of that is obviously the mental stress, but some of it is just, I don't care what you're driving. If you drive your street car to the track, you drive it for a few sessions on the track, it's tiring.
Yeah, and I think everybody, it's great that you mentioned that too, because I think everybody who goes to track days and events like that, whether it's just an HPDE or a club track day, that sort of thing, they're there to they're there to explore the limits of their cars, not to explore the limits of themselves. At least not in a physical fitness aspect. Obviously, some of them may want to see how hard they can push it and things like that. But they want to be able to drive their car as hard as they can for the entire day or the entire 2 days, and not feel like they've been the one holding the car back as opposed to the other way around, right? So I think I think this will be fun to go over some things that that they can do to help out themselves and make those track days maybe a little bit more enjoyable as opposed to hard work.
And I think, that's a really key point in that, the guys, gals who are going to the track and, they're not getting paid to drive race cars, but they're there to have fun and just to enjoy themselves. And I know from my own personal experience, and I don't think anybody's going to argue that if you're at the track and you're worn out and you're tired and you're hurting and everything, some of the fun kind of goes away. So obviously anything you can do to train to get fit is going to make a difference there.
I think some of the fun goes away, but I think also some of the improvement can go away as well, which, right. Improving is fun. So that kind of goes hand in hand. But, you can kind of get to a point where if you're too worn out, then you're not making any more improvements on what you maybe went that day to work on. If it's a track that you've been to a bunch of times, that you are working on a specific corner of that track that you want to get better, or if it's a track you've only been to, that's your first time, or you've only been there once and you want to learn the track and get better. All of that takes, physical power, brain power, and all this sort of stuff that if you're totally worn out, then you're not going to continue to get any better at driving either.
Exactly. And, but as you were talking there, I'm kind of like, how did you get, I'm just curious, how did you get into doing this? How did you get to the point where you're working with, obviously you're working with some elite, race drivers. How did you end up here doing that?
Well, it all started when I was probably about 12 years old. I was in love with IndyCar. I grew up, which makes it a real treat to talk to you right now, because I grew up in the early 90s of IndyCar. And so I grew up going to the Long Beach Grand Prix. I thought, man, that's so cool. That's what I want to do. By the time I was 11, 12 years old, I decided aerodynamics were what I really wanted to do with racing. So from then on, I was dead set going to school to be an aerodynamicist, and I'm going to be an aerodynamicist in IndyCar or Formula One or something like that. So I did that.
Cool.
I went to Virginia Tech, and I got a degree in aerospace engineering, and I worked as an engineer for 10 years. I wasn't in racing that entire time. I actually worked my first job out of school was at AIM Sports. So all of you guys listening who have AIM Solos and MXLs and Evos or whatever AIM data system you have in your car, if you had it back in 2007 and 2008, then I was probably one of the people working on it.
Oh, cool.
So I worked there
so we can either thank you or blame you, one of the two.
probably blame me.
Yeah.
I'd have to say I'm definitely a much better fitness trainer than I was engineer, but yeah, so I worked as an engineer for quite a bit, and it was while I was training for my own racing event. I was back in 2011. I was getting ready to do a world record attempt for greatest distance by a solo kart driver in 24 hours.
I saw that. So that's crazy.
Thank you. I was getting ready to drive a go-kart for 24 straight hours by myself. So fitness obviously was going to be extremely important in that. And through that whole process of getting ready for this one event, I trained for probably about 13, 14 months for just this one event. And through the whole process of that, I worked with a trainer where I was living in Maryland at the time, and got to work a little bit with the guys at Pit Fit Training and that sort of thing. I just remember thinking to myself, man, this is really cool. And then my next thought was, I could do this. And the more and more I got into it, the more and more I just really loved that process. And not just fitness, but the whole process of preparing somebody to perform at their peak for a given sport, and everything that went into that. And it just really fascinated me. So after the event, I did that at Newcastle Motorsports Park. If any of your karting listeners are familiar with it, Newcastle Motorsports Park over there in Indiana.
Yeah.
The Dismore family was super helpful in letting me do that and putting everything together for me to be able to do that. And, we managed to get the record. So after that, I looked up what kind of certification I would need to get to be a trainer. So I found the National Strength and Conditioning Association. That seemed to be what a lot of the professional sports strength and conditioning coaches were certified in. So I did that. I got all the study materials, and I didn't go to school for any of this. So it took me some time, and I studied for probably about 2 years. And October 2013, I took my exam for it, passed that. And when it came time to actually put it to use, I was still living up in Virginia at that time. So I wasn't in Charlotte. And my wife and we moved to Charlotte so I could pursue doing this. So I was working from home as an engineer. And when we moved down to Charlotte, I'd say it was probably October of 2013, somewhere in there, November 2013. And I reached out to Tom Long, who had actually, I saw that he had gotten the ride with the new Mazda prototype program.
Right.
In I guess it was Grand Am, or it was about to be the IMSA and Grand Am were about to combine there at the same time. And funnily enough, his parents and my parents were neighbors in Raleigh. So we knew each other from before, from before we lived in Charlotte. We essentially grew up a few doors down from each other. So I reached out to him when he got the prototype ride just to say, hey, congratulations. And, I know it's going to be a bit more physical from what you're used to. If you want to do some training, let me know. I'd love to help you out. And he said, yeah, sure. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. And, Tom, he's so nice. He would never turn anybody down very bluntly ever. But yeah, he said, and I think I may have reached out to him in January or something like that. And Rolex was right around the corner, that sort of thing. So obviously he's already getting himself prepared physically and mentally for the Rolex 24. And I said, hey man, just good luck. If you want to do some training afterwards, to get ready for the rest of the season, just let me know. And sure enough, I think it was like 2 days after he got back from Rolex, he said, hey man, let's get training.
Yeah.
So Tom was my first client, and it just kind of snowballed from there. It was something I knew I definitely wanted to do. I was still working as an engineer full time, working from home and training Tom during my lunch period or my lunch hour. And it just kind of picked up from there. He got me hooked up with another driver, who then got me hooked up with another driver, and before I knew it, I had a half a dozen or so. And it was time to decide if I wanted to, well, I shouldn't say it wasn't time to decide if I wanted to make that my new career. I knew I wanted to make that my new career, but it was time to decide to pull the trigger. So I did that. And as of October of last year, October of 2017, this has been my full-time gig.
I'm curious, the engineering background. I mean, I got to think that the way you approach the fitness training, you look at it kind of, I guess, as a process like an engineer would, and you're engineering the fitness of the driver. Would that be correct?
I'd say so. Yeah, I think I think a lot of most all of strength and conditioning coaches and people in this field, they're all scientists as well. So I think the approach can be very similar, and we're all very analytical, and we all want to make the machine work. And in this instance, the machine is the human body. So all of our hands and feet and limbs, they all work on basic pulley lever systems, just like anything else in the real world. So we kind of work to engineer the body in a similar way as to how the engineers build the car.
So let's go back a little bit to you doing the 24-hour karting race. I want to ask the question, why? And then maybe the follow-on question is, what did you learn from doing that?
I think the why, there were several whys, and without getting too deep into it, I think the main one was I love challenging myself, and I saw that somebody had done it, and kind of similar to what got me into fitness was the, hey, I can do that thought.
Uh-huh.
So I saw that somebody had done it, and I think it was e-karting news or something like that, e-karting news or one of the online karting publications that kind of put that question out there. They did the article on the guy who had done it, and it's somebody over in England who since actually has become a pretty good friend of mine. And then at the bottom of the article, they said, "Do you think you could do it?" And I guess I was the only one who thought I could.
Oh, okay.
It was kind of, I wanted to do more racing than I had been. I raced karts through high school and a little bit in college, and then kind of stopped so that I could finish college, and hadn't really gotten back into it after I graduated. I'd done a couple races here and there. And I kind of thought like, what's a better way to get a whole season of racing in than to do this? So I kind of got an entire year's worth of driving in 24 hours.
Yeah. And I gotta think, I mean, it's just, how painful is that?
It was pretty bad. I don't want to make it seem like I was, on the brink of death or anything like that, but it was pretty painful. And I think a lot of people ask me, how do you train for that? And how do you prepare? And you asked me what I learned, and what I really learned was, it doesn't matter what you do to prepare for it. It's going to be painful. I mean, it's really going to hurt, and You got to be ready for it. You've got to be mentally ready for it to hurt a lot and to push through. So, I've done it several times in several different venues. I've done it with, outdoor. I've done it on an indoor track. I've done it in the form of a record attempt, in the form of an actual race. So, I mean, there's been different ways that I've gone about this whole driving a cart for 24 hours by myself, and they all hurt, and they all hurt in their different ways as well. So, I mean, it's painful, but honestly, the most challenging thing is much more mental, to stay focused for that long and to stay on task. I mean, your mind, it doesn't matter how good your focus is, your mind wanders when you're doing something like that for 24 straight hours. So, songs get stuck in your head. You start thinking about, gee, I wonder who's going to get elected president in 2054, and just random things that you never would think about normally. And then, the next one is, how do I get this damn song out of my head? So yeah, it's definitely a big mental challenge as well as physical.
And obviously they go together, because the more your body's hurting, the harder it is to mentally focus. The more your mental focus goes off, the more you start to realize how much your body hurts, right?
Exactly. Well, I mean, it's part of once you start hurting, all you can think about is how much you're hurting, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely have to battle against that a little bit, but you stay focused on the end goal, and to do that, you just stay focused on what you have to do next. So, if you're on a straightaway, you try to think about your next brake zone, your next turn in, and your next corner exit, and then you move on to the next one, and then you move on to the next one, and then you move on to the next one, and you just do that over and over and over again for however many laps you need to.
So do you think, I'm kind of curious about this now because I'm thinking about the process of regaining focus. So I always say that, it's not a matter of maintaining focus. It's a matter of how quickly can you regain it. And, do you think that because you got a chance to practice regaining focus, are you better at regaining focus than you were before you did these races?
I hadn't really, excuse me, I hadn't really thought of that, but I would say that the answer to that's probably yes. And I think now that I'm looking back on it and going back to, my seventh 24-hour race versus my first, I was definitely able to zone back in a lot better and a lot more quickly if I did find myself trailing off. Obviously, the goals were a little bit different. I think with the first one that I did, I was on the track all by myself. And this last one that I did in May, I was on the track with 44 other karts.
Wow.
So the mental challenges were very different, and it was a lot easier to remain engaged when there were so many other karts on track. But yeah, I think, and the other thing that really that was the hugest challenge, I think, in this last one that I did was, and it comes out to ends up being a funny story, is I'd say probably about 10, 15 minutes into the race, I had my brother on the radio with me for the whole 24, and about 10, 15 minutes in the race, I get on the radio and say, Hey, Drew, can you give me an update on time every hour or so, just so I know where we are, fuel window wise and stuff like that? He said, yeah, sure. And it was amazing that I hadn't noticed it yet, but the very next lap, I come around and I say, hey, Drew, cancel that last request. There's a timer on the start gantry. So I got to see every single lap for, I don't know, I don't even remember how many laps it was now, but every single lap so every 1 minute and 12 seconds roughly, I got to see how far away I really was from being 24 hours done. So that was an interesting mental challenge.
Yeah.
Almost to, as opposed to being able to zone back in and refocus, it was, okay, how do I not focus on this for every single lap as I'm going through?
Right.
And that was an interesting challenge. So thankfully it was close enough on the front straightaway. It was close enough to turn one that I could choose to focus on turn one instead of focusing on the timer every single lap. But there were definitely hours where I couldn't help myself.
Well, and that's I got to think that that's good practice to kind of go, okay, I have a choice. I can focus on the time or I can focus on turn one. So I'm going to choose to focus on turn one. So yeah, again, great practice. Hey, not everybody listening to the show is a Tom Long, who is, Tom, good friend and just amazing person and driver. And, his commitment, I see him working out with you. So I got to think, he's got amazing commitment there. But again, not everybody listening to the show is in that kind of a position. Can you talk about what some drivers, who are, either they do this half a dozen times a year, or they go club racing or whatever, maybe a little bit more casual than a pro driver that's going to go to the gym 5-6 days a week. What can some drivers do in a very simple way to help them train? And maybe it starts with, what are the areas they should focus on? I guess, I don't know. That's up to you. Yeah.
Well, I think you actually just said part of the answer there with the word simple. And I think the main thing for a lot of track day folks and some amateur racers and stuff like that who maybe can't get to the gym but 2 or 3 times a week, or just 1 or 2 times a week, is to keep it simple. You know, you don't really have to get extremely intricate, I guess, or complex with your training. Obviously, for guys like Tom or Colin or somebody like that, you know, we do have extremely advanced methods of training them for what they're going to do, but that's because they can devote a lot of time to it. I mean, this is their job. It's what they do for a living. So if this isn't your job and it isn't what you do for a living, you have something that you have to spend the bulk of your time on that isn't training for racing. And yeah, I think the main thing would be to keep it simple and really focus on things that will benefit your driving, right? And I think we get the term fitness a little bit misconstrued. Everybody thinks of it as being physically fit, which that is a part of it, but the term fitness actually refers to being suitable to fulfill a task, right? Being the most suitable that you can be to perform a specific task. In this case, the task being driving a car as fast as you can. So I think there are things outside of your physical fitness that people can improve as well, or outside of what normal people would term physical fitness can do. So I think if you can get to the gym a couple times a week, great. Focus on the basics with that. You know, general body strength is always helpful. I think core strength is probably the most vital area. If you can control your body, then you can control your car a lot better. And then I think one of the main things, and we work on this a lot with our professional drivers and would be extremely beneficial for drivers at any level, is being able to breathe. And I think that gets overlooked a lot. Drivers are in very compromised positions when it comes to their breathing. Belts are tight over the chest and the shoulders. They're in kind of a crunched position no matter what car you're in. Even if your seat is sitting upright, your abdomen is still crunched just a little bit, and your chest is kind of is pinned down. So what a lot of people do when they're out of breath is they try to expand the chest to get a deep breath in, but that's actually really shallow breathing. So one of the things we focus on with our drivers is first diaphragmatic breathing. So we get them to really expand, so contract the diaphragm and really expand the lungs, as opposed to trying to take a breath in through the chest and use the neck muscles to bring the chest up. It's also referred to as belly breathing. Mm-hmm. If anybody wants to look it up on YouTube, there's some really good tutorials on how to just get the basics of diaphragmatic breathing down first. And then we take that into different areas that mimic what they're going to be experiencing in the car. So when you're in a car, your core muscles, your abdominal muscles, are contracted for most of the time that you're in there. Whether you're going through a corner, accelerating, braking, they all require stability from the body, and that all ends up contracting your core abdominal muscles. So what I just talked about with diaphragmatic breathing, that involves expanding the belly. Well, that's kind of hard to do when your abs are contracted. So we use several techniques that I call stressed breathing. And what we do is we essentially teach the diaphragm to fight for space in the abdomen. And you can see some of this, shameless plug, if you go to my Instagram, Podium Performance Fitness, you can see some of the techniques that we use with the drivers, where we put their body in a stressed position so that their core is stressed, their abdomen is contracted, and then we force them to breathe into that without elevating the chest to breathe. So I think that's one thing that can have a huge benefit, and it's really easy to practice on your own. You don't even have to go to a gym to do this. You can practice your breathing at home.
Is that something that having, I guess, somebody to help, I don't know, monitor, make sure that you're doing it right in the very beginning is important, or is it something fairly simple to do?
Yes and no. I think there's So, and that's why we start with the diaphragmatic breathing, where they're just lying down on, these guys are lying down on their back. And what we do is we have them put a hand on their chest and a hand on their belly. And that way, those hands can kind of monitor how much the chest is moving and how much the belly is moving. And what you want to do is make it so that the hand on your belly is moving more than the hand on your chest. So once you've trained yourself to breathe in that manner, then you can start loading it up. Then you can start putting the core under stress and still focusing on breathing through the diaphragm as opposed to bringing the chest out. So I think it starts with learning the technique first in an unstressed, unloaded capacity, and then introducing external stress.
That's cool. That's, as you said, it's simple and yet critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of drivers, they may either hold their breath through corners, which, simply reminding them to breathe, that helps. But then are they still getting an efficient breath in when they do? Odds are they aren't. They're getting a very shallow breath in. So this really helps to make the breathing process more efficient while you're in the race car. And as a result, all of your muscles get a much larger amount of oxygen delivered to them, and they recover faster. And voila, they're less fatigued at the end of a race. And you haven't even trained a single muscle outside of the abdomen and diaphragm yet. So I think that breathing is sort of at the base of all of this, and you can really improve a lot just by focusing attention there before you even get to anything else.
I used to, well, I still do. I mean, I guess, but I used to very deliberately, when I was driving on the street, on the highway, as I come to a freeway off ramp, I'd, exhale as I come off there. And I was saying I was programming myself, building a habit of breathing while cornering, because so many drivers I'd see would hold their breath. So I would build this. And so I'm kind of thinking, going, the next step is I should have been thinking about where I was breathing from, not just making sure that I was breathing, but breathing from belly breathing. And so I'm gonna add that to my own training. So the other thing that I think you touched on is when we're breathing, we tend to relax, and when we're holding our breath, we tense up. And I always say, when you tense up, you grip the wheel tighter. First of all, it's more tiring, but secondly, you don't get as much feedback as well. So you're not sensing the limits of the car as well. So, like you said, it all starts with breathing.
Yeah. And I think, you just made a really good point where when we don't breathe, we tense up, but also when we tense up, we don't breathe.
Yeah. So which comes first?
It's really hard to pick out the chicken and the egg in there, right? And which one is causing which? Which one's causing which? Well, if we can work on training our breathing, then we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Because we can breathe when we're tensed up. And hey, guess what? When you don't tense up as a result of anything else, you're tensing up just as a result of the external load that's being put on you, and you can still breathe through it. So I think the body's natural tendency is when the abs are turned on, when the abs are contracted, you got to hold your breath. And we want to make sure that that's not the case, because your abs are contracted almost all the way around the lap.
Yeah. And I guess what else can we do? And, like when you mentioned your Instagram post, I love seeing the different images that you post of drivers you work with. Usually, often it's Tom and Colin Braun. But I see you guys doing some stuff that doesn't require some super sophisticated and expensive equipment either, right? And I think that's important for a lot of people to know that you don't need to go and spend a ton of money.
Yeah, definitely not. And it's funny because I get that question sometimes, especially with guys that really do want to maximize everything that they possibly can. And they come in to see me in the gym 2 or 3 times a week. And then they say, hey, should I get this machine for home? Should I get this machine for home? And that's where I say, I usually tell them, no, don't bother. look, if you know, if you want, we can program some things for while you're at home that you don't need that machine for and would be more beneficial for you. So, yeah, I think that it's easy to get caught up in whatever the latest and greatest is when it comes to fitness machines, and then also machines that do a lot of different things. You know, oh, this is great to have in the home because it folds up and it doesn't take up much space, and you can do 8 million different exercises on it. And what I always say about those is they can do, you know, let's say something has 33 exercise capabilities. Well, it can do 33 exercises kind of well.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do any of them really well.
Yeah.
Right? So what we want to focus on is quality over quantity when it comes to stuff like that. So, and that goes back to, you know, even when you're in the gym, keeping it simple. There are exercises like the bench press or the cable row, things like that. We call them compound exercises because they work multiple joints. You can really get most everything that you need from these larger multiple joint exercises. You don't need, you know, like I said, unless you're at that level of Tom Long or Colin Braun or John Edwards or somebody like that, then you don't necessarily need to get as overly specific as we do with those guys. So, but yeah, if you're doing stuff at home, you know, there's a lot of body weight exercises that you can do. You can manipulate the push-up in several different ways. There's, you know, things like what we call air squats, where you're squatting your body weight. One thing I really put a big emphasis on is doing things on one foot. So what that does is it helps develop hip strength and stability from the hip. And everything that a driver does with his or her feet in the car originates from the hip. So if we don't have good hip strength, we don't have good hip stability, all of their foot movements aren't going to be nearly as controlled and nearly as precise. So we do a lot of work with balancing, you know, simply balancing on one foot, stand on one foot, touch the floor, stand back up. You know, hopping a quarter turn on one foot. Really simple stuff like that helps to develop that ankle and hip stability and gets them working together. And one thing it also does is it helps develop feel in the foot. And you know, you feel the landing. You feel through the foot what needs to be done to keep yourself upright and that sort of thing. So, you know, driving is done so much by feel. And the better feel we can create through the driver's foot, whether it's in the car or standing on one foot, then the more we can improve their skills behind the wheel, not just their fitness, but, you know, what we say as being fit is being more suitable to perform a task, right? So having that better feel makes a driver better, and something that we can do in the gym or at home, something like that helps with their ability to drive, not just their ability to be in better shape.
Well, I mean, first off, the whole thing around balance, I'm big proponent of that, because I think, you know, how can you tell how the balance of a car is if you don't have good balance, a good sense of balance? And balance to me is, you know, it's a skill. It's something, you know, it's not like, well, that person's born with more balance than other person. We all kind of have a sense of balance, and then it's what we fine tune it. But I think the other thing, and I'm not going to mention any names here, but I've worked with a couple of drivers where I took a video camera, pointed it down at their feet. They were sharing a car. I pointed it down at their feet, and one driver, the way that driver released the brake pedal was magically smooth. And the other driver, it was like it was in steps. And, you know, one of my recommendations was go work on the strength of your foot, ankle, calf muscles. And I know from doing that, the control. I mean, you know, I use the example of, you know, you lift weights you sign your name on a piece of paper, you draw a picture on a piece of paper, and then you lift weights until your arm's ready to fall off, and you go to try to sign your name, and your handwriting is messy. Well, the same thing when the muscles in your foot and ankle and calf get tired, right? You don't have that same fine motor control with your feet. Is that right?
It's absolutely correct. Yeah. And I think it's so easy for a lot of people, even within racing, to think of driving as an upper body activity because drivers are sitting down. But what they're able to do with their feet, what they have to be able to do with their feet is just so unbelievably important. And like you said, that if their calves and their quads and their ankle complex is getting fatigued, then all of those movements aren't going to be as fine. They're not going to be as precise, and they're not going to be as smooth. And it's going to cause either a mistake or simply a slower lap time as a result of compensating so that you don't make a mistake.
And I always, I go to this, we hear a driver that, well, I made a mistake and I spun off the track. Well, what caused the mistake? Carrying too much speed. Well, was it carrying too much? Maybe it was the muscles in your foot or ankle were not, as fine tuned as they should be. And you release the brake pedal too slowly or too quickly or whatever. And it would kind of just upset the balance of the car. And when you're at that close to the limit, like we play on the track, that can make all the difference in the world. Yeah.
And it's kind of like, you just mentioned, I was carrying too much speed. Okay. Well, why were you carrying too much speed? Oh, because I didn't brake hard enough. Okay. Why didn't you brake hard enough? I couldn't apply as much pressure. Okay. Now you've dug down to what that was. And, everybody always gets really annoyed by the little kid in the back seat who keeps asking why to every single question. But you know what? That little sucker's onto something.
I agree.
And I think when, as we all get older, we forget to ask why to everything. And, in situations exactly like that, it's okay. You made a mistake. Why did you make a mistake? I was carrying too much corner speed. Okay. Well, why were you carrying too much corner speed? I was late to get on the brakes. And I didn't want to lock up. Okay. Why were you late to get on the brakes? Oh, because I was thinking about the turkey sandwich I want to eat after the race or something like that. Whatever that root cause may be, we have to keep asking why to get to it. And whether it's a lapse in judgment or inability to apply the proper amount of brake pressure or missing a turn in because, your reaction time has slowed or whatever it is, it's going to trace back to some sort of human error, to something which can ultimately be prevented by preparing better.
And as you were saying that, I'm thinking, one of the things that I've experienced and seen is, upper body, you mentioned we think about it upper body and we pay attention to neck muscles and shoulder and all that kind of stuff. But I think, somebody that doesn't spend a lot of time with a helmet on in a car with G loads, you start going around a corner, and as your neck muscle gets a little tired, with each lap, your head leans a little bit more. Well, with each lap, the information coming in through your eyes is different.
It's different. Yep.
And now you're seeing things a little different. So you turn in a little later or a little earlier or at a different speed because you're just not making those fine judgments as the same level. So, I guess. I don't think we've got to convince. I think we've convinced everybody that fitness matters.
Well, I love that you just mentioned the visual reference, though, because that's another thing, and it was kind of what I wanted to get to next with, what kind of things can we do to prepare, simple things, and vision is such a huge thing as well.
Yeah, talk about that. Yeah,
we think of muscle endurance, we think of reaction time, I'd say is probably a fairly obvious one. But on the less obvious is the breathing and then, the vision. And, we do things to account for that variable, visual reference. So even if your head isn't leaning more and more each lap or anything like that, your visual reference is never always exactly the same as it was the lap before. You know, there may be a car in front of you that's 10 feet in front of you. There may be a car in front of you that's 30 feet in front of you. There may be no car in front of you. There may be a little bit more or less light in the atmosphere that lap than there was even the lap before, some cloud cover over the sun or something like that. Things that we may not really think about as being a different visual reference, but they are. So we work really hard to train for that and to work on different depth perception techniques and things like that. So we'll do simple drills like covering one eye and tossing a tennis ball back and forth. We use with our guys, we use something called Strobe Goggles, which essentially flash. They strobe as the athlete is wearing them, and we'll toss tennis balls at them. One tennis ball, two tennis balls at the same time, something like that, so that their visual reference is always different. And
I like juggling with my strobe glasses.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. I wish I could do that. Something to get the guys working on, I guess. But yeah, it's if we can work to improve a driver's vision, then we can improve their performance. So if we do like I said, simple drills, cover one eye and toss a tennis ball back and forth. Cover one eye and stand on one foot and toss a tennis ball back and forth. That way you're incorporating both the vision and the balance aspect of it. And the great thing about that is vision is one of the three systems at work in governing balance.
Mm-hmm.
So you got your inner ear, your vestibular system, your vision, and then your sense of feel. Those are the three systems working to help you balance. So if you take some of that away, you take away some of the vision, then you're improving those other two systems. At the same time, you can improve vision, improve depth perception by working on something coming towards you or away from you with one eye closed or one eye covered or whatever it may be. And make sure you do both eyes, not just your dominant eye when it comes to this stuff.
Right. Hey, and that just reminded me of a piece of advice that I got a long time ago about any kind of fitness training was you make sure you do what you enjoy. And, one of the things that I've always enjoyed is racket sports. So I played a lot of racquetball, a lot of squash, a lot of tennis, table ping pong, badminton, any racket sports. And to me, they're good for general fitness and everything. But I think more than anything else, it's helped me visually. It's, like you said, it's the ball is coming, especially, racquetball or squash. The ball is just like bing, 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 and it's coming around, and you got to pick up so much stuff peripherally and make judgments of how quickly something's coming towards you and all of that. So, I don't care. The great thing about racquetball, for example, is, you go and play tennis and you spend, if you've never played tennis before, you spend more time picking the ball up out of the net or chasing going outside the fence and picking it up. In a racquetball court, you can't lose the ball, and anybody can hit a ball against a wall. So go find a racquetball court, smack the ball against the wall, and then when you start having it coming off from different angles, it's just such great experience that way. And the great thing about racquetball is you can go to a racquetball court, and yes, sometimes they're getting harder to find, but go and find a racquetball court. You can go into a court by yourself. You don't need a partner.
Yeah. I think most YMCAs still have some sort of racquetball court, don't they?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're still around. So go find one. I'm a big fan of that. So I don't know, because when you were talking about tossing the tennis ball, okay, that relies on a partner. But can you cover your eye and just toss a ball, bounce it on the floor and up on the wall and catch it again? That same kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, bounce it against a wall. What I like to do if I don't have anybody with me is set up some sort of just like a flat surface at an angle near the floor so that it kind of, it bounces right back up to you. Mm-hmm. So if you set up like just a piece of wood or something like that at like a 45 to 60 degree angle between the floor and the wall. That way you can throw it a little harder, and it's coming at an angle so that it's not so difficult to catch. Obviously hand-eye coordination is part of it, but you're not trying to bend at an angle to try to catch this thing. That's really weird. So, just that sort of, that slanted surface at floor level makes it really, really effective to do that drill and keep it really consistent. But yeah, I love that you said you got to do something you enjoy, because man, if you're doing something that you don't, you're not going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
You're not going to keep training if you hate training. So, for you, it's racquetball. I love going mountain biking. I think that's,
that's another one. Yeah.
Obviously it's it's great in the cardiorespiratory aspect and things like that. But again, with the vision, and reaction, you're with mountain biking, you're having to constantly survey the ground in front of you and see what moves you have to make on the bike so that you can keep moving forward and not start tumbling head over wheel. So,
and the whole practicing looking at where you want to go, not where you don't want to go, right? The don't look at that tree thing. Yeah.
It's fun. I use that all the time with the guys that I work with too. We do an exercise called the Turkish Get Up, where they have to hold a kettlebell essentially over their head for as they go through another sequence of movements. And I always remind them, look up, keep your eyes on that kettlebell. I said, just think of it this way. Look where you want the kettlebell to be, not where you don't want the kettlebell to be.
All right, so right.
If you want it to stay up above your head, that's where you should be looking, right? So I always use the analogy: look where you want the car to go, not where the car is going.
Yeah.
In the same way that they do this exercise, and it usually works. It usually gets them to put their eyes straight back up to straight back up to the kettlebell.
So, Trey, obviously we could spend the next 2 hours talking about this stuff, but you've given us some great advice of, first of all, kind of keep it simple. Focus on what's going to benefit your driving. And we've talked about some core stuff, some breathing, the fine muscle control in your feet and all that kind of stuff, balance, those kinds of things, and the vision training stuff. If there was one piece of advice, your speed secret for a driver, and it could be related to fitness, obviously that's your area of expertise, but, is there one piece of advice that you'd give a driver?
I've listened to a couple of your episodes of this, and I knew you were going to ask it, and I didn't think of an answer to it yet.
Perfect. I wanted to put you on the spot.
Good. I would say, just from my own driving experience, take the pressure off yourself. I think a lot of people put so much pressure on themselves to get better and to improve or to perform. And, for me, at least, when I realized that what I was doing in terms of, racing, that when I realized that really wasn't important in the grand scheme of my life, it was just fun. I performed so much better.
Funny how that works.
Yeah. And, we think about, obviously everybody, if you're listening to this podcast, racing is important to you. Your track days are important to you. Your being on track in general is important to you. And so is improving, and so is competition. I'm very driven by competition and by a challenge. But once I kind of realized that, hey, this is just a go-kart race, man, I did so much better.
Yeah.
So, even for professionals, I think take the pressure off yourself, and you'll find new areas of your brain open up and have capacity for more learning and more performance when you take all of that brain power that was focused on the pressure that's on you and let it focus on other things.
That is fantastic. As you were talking about being competitive, I've heard some stories about you and Tom and Colin and John and some rowing competitions going on. So who's in the lead at the moment?
Yeah. So when I think it's actually a pretty good story behind this. I trained Colin at his house. He's got a gym set up there, and John Edwards trains with him on a fairly regular basis. Sometimes he's at the gym, sometimes he's at Colin's. And I show up one day, and those two are in the pool. So my first thought was, well, they're going to pay for this. And so for their workout that day, they got to do a 10-kilometer relay row. So each would row 500 meters at a time and then trade off. And, Colin and John, the competitive guys they are, they were dialing in everything down to the driver changes on getting on and off the rower.
Yeah.
So they put up a time, and they were a little bit angry that they were the first ones to do it and they didn't have anything to shoot for. So they challenged me and Tom to do it. And we came up just a little bit short. I think they got us by 30 seconds or so. And to be clear, I was definitely the weak link on that one. Tom could have. Tom was able to hang with those two, no problem, and I was just a couple seconds off every 500 meters, and it just kind of added up. So Colin and John are in the lead right now. But I think I heard something about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and his trainer doing it as well. And I didn't get to see what their time was, but I heard they did a pretty good job. So if you're apt on the rower, if you like being on the Concept 2 rower and you've got a partner, then go for it. 500 meters each, trading off for 10,000 meters. Let us know what your time is.
Yeah, perfect. Hey, Trey, so this has been fantastic. Great advice. Really, really appreciate it. And I know everyone is now just going to, immediately go and hit the gym and get going and in a simple way. But, on your website, you've got some information about the different programs that you offer, podiumperformancefitness.com. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And in social media, what you already mentioned, Instagram at Podium Performance Fitness. And like I said, I like looking at, when I see some of the images that you posted here, it kind of inspires me to go, I gotta go do something. So it's great inspiration as well. Anything else? Any other information people should follow you, get a hold of you?
On Facebook, it's Podium Performance Fitness. And then on Twitter, it's at Podium PF. So you can contact us in any of those ways. You can follow along in any of those ways. I'd say I'm probably the most active on Instagram. That's where you're going to see most of our content. But yeah, those are the socials, website as well. And I've got, if you ever want to reach out to me directly, it's Trey at podiumperformancefitness.com. Real simple.
Okay. And I know on your website you've got a couple of different programs that you offer for not only people that are in Charlotte, but can work with you, and then you can help keep them on track over a period of time, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, we've got our kind of stable of drivers here in Charlotte. And then for anybody who's able to come in for usually a few hours to do what I call an evaluation session, if you're in the Charlotte area and you can make it in for an evaluation, then we can provide programming for you after that, online. So the evaluation up front is mandatory, though. I don't just send things out to people I've never met. So it's got to be something where you can come in and we can go over everything that we're going to be doing and get a baseline of your fitness level, and then from there I can provide coaching online for you.
And I know personally, this was before you were you were doing this a long time before you were doing this, but, I did a program similar to that where I went and got that baseline evaluation and then worked remotely, and it made a massive difference. And even to the point where, it gave me, and I suspect it's a little bit, your program is a little bit like this where, after a day at the track or race or something like that, I could come back and go, that little muscle that's right up there, how do I fix that one? Because that's the one that was bothering me. And just having that ability to keep fine tuning, the fitness, my training was just, it made all the difference in the world. So, hey, Trey, thanks for being on the show. Really, really appreciate it. And I know everyone listening to this, I've gotten a lot out of it, and I know they've got some inspiration and some ideas of what they're going to do. So I really appreciate it. Thanks for doing that. And thanks for keeping those guys like Colin and John and Tom and the others on, keeping them fit.
Absolutely, Russ. It was my pleasure. And thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And I love doing this kind of thing.
Yeah. And I can't wait to hear about your next 24-hour karting race. It's mind-boggling to think about, but
no promises.
Yeah. Okay, Trey, and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Yeah, you as well. Happy New Year, Ross. Thanks again.
One of the things Trey and I talked about was the importance of footwork, and specifically how that impacts your braking and corner entry speed. And that's the focus of the next webinar I'll be doing on January 15th, in less than a couple weeks. It's called How to Improve Your Braking and Corner Entry for a Reason. It'll make you a faster driver, specifically on the entry of corners, which is the area that separates the best from the rest. To learn more and register, go to speedsecrets.com/braking-entry. Again, speedsecrets.com/braking-entry. And as with all my webinars, even if you can't be there when I'm doing it live, if you register, you'll get all the content and a full recording of it so you can view it whenever you want. I hope to see you online or be able to share what I've learned about being better at braking and corner entry in the recording of the webinar. 2018 was a fantastic year for the podcast, and I'm planning as good or better a year in 2019. So thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you again next week when I'm talking with another interesting guest. In fact, don't miss next week if you want an even better understanding of why we drive the line that we do. Until then, keep learning and having fun.